with the breath. So if you're a vinyasa teacher or you're a hatha teacher who likes to incorporate this kind of flow, or a flow teacher, then cueing with the breath is one of the most amazing tools that we can use as teachers. It helps our students to connect more with their internal sense of awareness, can help us to open up and feel our feelings. It helps bring our students into the present moment and gives us a focal point for meditation. It can help to pacify the nervous system, increase breath capacity, all of these good, yummy things that the breath can do. So how do we do it skillfully, and what exactly is happening? In this video, we're going to break it down. We're going to look at the anatomy of breathing and what is really happening in the body, and then how can we skillfully bring that into our class to make flowing with the breath a more integrated part of our practice and teaching. So y'all, I love moving with the breath. So just to kind of give us a context for vinyasa, or moving with the breath, this really comes from the Ashtanga tradition, that lineage. In the Ashtanga lineage, the breath is kind of the primary focal point. And indeed, in some of the yoga therapy lineages of Desikachar, moving with the breath is primary, and then the physical asana is kind of inspired by that intrinsic movement of the breath. Conversely, if we come on over to our Iyengar lineages, so these are all Krishnamacharya little babies, but over with the Iyengar lineage, breath is certainly mentioned and it is used to enhance the practice, but it is not like the primary focal point. Whereas in Ashtanga, it's like basically if you're following a lead class, they're cueing the breath and not much else. That's really the primary driver of the practice and the experience. So it's just kind of nice to know a little historical context about where all this breath cueing comes from to begin with. So let's look at the anatomy of breathing and what is actually happening. Now, for a real in-depth dive into this, please check out my anatomy of breathing video where we get into all of the nitty-gritty. But let's just do the greatest hits right here. So the primary muscle of respiration is the diaphragm. And the diaphragm lives about here in our body. It connects to the costal margins, so to the inner surface of our ribs. And it's like an umbrella that floats up here and snuggles up against the heart. And then it connects down the back of our spine via these two different crus, right? These little legs that actually interdigitate a bit with the psoas. So the diaphragm is connected to our core canister, like to our transverse abdominis, the deepest layer of our core. It's also connected to our psoas, and it is the marcation, it's the separation between what we might call our thoracic cavity here, which contains our lungs and our heart, and the abdominal cavity, which contains all of our viscera, like our stomach, our liver, our spleen, our small intestines, large intestines, gallbladder, pancreas, etc. So when we inhale, as we take breath in, actually, common misconception, we don't inhale and then the breath comes in. What happens is that our diaphragm contracts. And when it contracts, it pulls onto a central tendon here and pulls down. And as it pulls down, or sometimes a little wide here, it is connected to our lungs on its underside. And as it moves down, it increases the space, the volume of our lungs. Our lungs get bigger. So imagine here's the diaphragm going down, the lungs are connected, and the lungs get bigger. And you know what happens when there's a pressure differential happening. So when there's greater space here, something that gets sucked in. The opposite is if you say you have like a scuba canister and you open it, the contents in there are under high pressure, and so when you open it, the air rushes out. Well, when we have less pressure, like we do when our lungs get bigger, air rushes in. And that is our inhale, my friends. So when we inhale and the diaphragm moves down, if the diaphragm is kind of freely moving, that is, if we aren't engaging our core and the diaphragm descends, we get what some people call a belly breath, which means that my belly moves. So just try it with me. Come and have a little seat. Right? And as you inhale, and you might lie down for this too if you feel a little, tense or anything like that. You can lie down, put a hand on your belly, And as you inhale, let your belly move. Now, are you adding any contents to your abdominal cavity? No, you're not. It's like a little water balloon. As you push on one end, the other end pooches out. That's what's happening right here. So all of this is like this fluid-filled canister with all of your viscera, kind of all your internal organs all in there like little snuggly kitties. And when we inhale and the diaphragm pushes down like a water balloon, it just splooges out where there's space. The spine's in the back, so it usually comes out in the belly. Now, if I'm holding my core, so try that now with me. Engage your abdominal muscles, right? Engage them here, all around, tighten up your corset, and then take a breath in. You're gonna feel what's like a chest breath, right? So instead of the diaphragm moving down, it flares out. The ribs might also help. We have accessory muscles that attach onto the ribs that can help to lift and spread them. And so then the breath stays more, is in the chest cavity, or the chest cavity is the thing that moves in response to the lungs. So on a belly breath, I inhale, the diaphragm descends without a problem, like a little water balloon, it splooges out my belly. If I hold this tight though, and the diaphragm can't go down in the same way, then my ribs are gonna lift, and as my lungs expand, the ribs lift, and that's where I'm going to feel the breath more, even into the collarbones. Your lungs, come all the way up here. Isn't that crazy? Way up here. All right, also I should mention that the lungs are really an organ of your back body. We always think of our lungs in the front, but actually they're higher than we think. They're like up here, all the way to here, and they're also in the back of our body. So, we could inhale and try to send that breath into the back because that's where our lungs are. However, folks, I will say that if you have trouble moving breath into any part of your body here, oftentimes that's because our musculature is tight. So maybe it's hard for you to feel the breath in your upper back because the muscles of your upper back are used to being a little more contracted. So anyways, this is all a great exploration. If this is perking your curiosity, go check out Anatomy of Breathing because we dive into it a lot more in that particular video. But for our purposes now, we can say that when we inhale, we're bringing air in, our lungs inflate, there's a sense of expansion, and when I exhale, the lungs settle down. And also, if you notice this, take a breath with me. Take an inhale, exhale all the way out, and notice what happens here, right? At the very end of our exhale, there is a natural engagement of this corset of the core. And if you're really tuned in, you may also feel your pelvic floor lift. So the respiratory diaphragm, which lives here, and the pelvic floor kind of work together. As you inhale and the diaphragm descends, the pelvic floor actually softens down too and creates space. And then as you exhale and the diaphragm lifts up, the pelvic floor also lifts up, which for yoga fans out there helps us create something called Mula Bandha, which is where the diaphragm of the pelvic floor engages up to create more of a muscular canister of support from the bottom of the pelvis. All right, if I'm gonna break it down real simply, we'll say that on the inhale, there is an expansion, and on the exhale, there is a contraction or a softening in. Inhale, expansion, exhale, contraction. Let's do that together. It feels yummy. Inhale, expansion. Exhale, contraction. And this dynamic, expansion, contraction, is an echo of the fundamental pulse of the universe. Our heart does it all the time too. Expansion and contraction. And this rhythm in yoga philosophy is called spanda. It's like the intrinsic expansion and contraction of the universe. I just love this. It's like string theory, all those strings vibrating. It's like this essential movement that happens in this particular realm, right? Of Prakriti, of the material world. So when we're breathing also and connecting to this fundamental life force movement, I think we're just tapping into something which is more than just the inhale and the exhale. It's almost like the essential movement, it is the essential movement of life. Okay, so all of that's well and good, but what does that have to do with practicing yoga? So take this idea of getting bigger or pulling in, and let's bring that into some of the asana practice, because you see, the mechanics of breathing can help support the biomechanics of moving in asana. And let's just take a really simple example like cat and cow. So when I'm on all fours in cat, right, as I inhale and pull my chest forward, I'm creating more space in my lungs. And then as I exhale and round, can you see how this scooping action, I'm kind of drawing in the front of my body, and this helps me to activate my core, or we might say the deep abdominal muscles. So the contraction of the core, if we'll recall, kind of goes with the natural movement of the exhale. So anytime that I am rounding, contracting, hugging in, moving into flexion, it's a really good time to use the exhale to help increase that lift of the pelvic floor and that engaging of the deep corset. Remember, the exhale kind of helps that wrap and that engagement to happen. So try it with me, cat, cow, and we'll start on the exhale to make it a little bit easier. So take just a natural inhale and exhale. As you inhale, move your heart forward. And as you exhale, round. Inhaling in. And exhale, round. And then let that go. Now, is it incorrect to do cat and cow the opposite way? No, of course not. So here's the thing. Really, we want to engender in our students an ability to breathe in lots of different ways in their body. It's amazing when we're practicing yoga that we move our body into all these strange positions, and then we're asking ourselves to breathe, which is an amazing massage for the internal organs. It's great for moving things around. So we want to be able to breathe in lots of different ways. So it's never wrong to breathe in a different way than what I'm sort of describing here. But each time you try it differently, you'll get something different out of it. So I encourage you, I'm going to make some suggestions here today, but also try it the opposite way. You'll always get something new from it. So generally speaking, we could say, I'm going to inhale when I'm creating more space, and I'm going to exhale when I'm creating less space or finding that contraction energy. So let's take another simple example of a forward fold. Just for the sake of my hamstrings, I'm going to bend my knees like Baddha Konasana, but I might inhale to lift and create that nice long spine, and then exhale when I'm folding in. You can even find a little mini flow here, and inhale, subtle expansion, exhale, contracting. And when I'm breathing, in a yoga practice, I'm sort of feeling like it's a wave of breath moving up. So as I inhale, it's like I'm inhaling, it sort of starts from my lower ribs and moves all the way to the top. And then as I exhale, that wave moves out. So as you inhale, get longer. Exhale, contract in. And that would be the same for any forward fold. Inhale, use the inhale to find space and length. Exhale to draw in, right? So general rule, if I'm doing a twist, twists are great. This is Luna, by the way. Twists are great for finding this, because in a twisting position, we want to inhale to find space, and then we are using our abdominals and our obliques to turn. So I could inhale, lift, exhale, twist, right? Inhale to find more lift and openness, space, exhale, to compress and twist. So whenever I'm teaching a twist in a flow class, I'm going to use the breath to help enhance that lengthening, exhale, twisting. Inhale, lengthen, exhale, twist. We can see this dynamic really well in a sun salutation, right? Inhale, I'm lifting, I'm creating more space. In fact, the lift of my arms helps me to lift my chest. As I exhale, I'm drawing everything in. On this inhale, Again, a little spinal extension and length. Exhale. I'm drawing in. Watch that again. Inhale. Little spinal extension. This time, exhale. I'm lowering down chaturanga. That requires some core. Inhale. Spinal extension, little back bend, opening the chest. Exhale, engaging the core to press back to downward facing dog. I do a whole video on the sun salutation too that you can check out. But you can see as I'm doing this essential movement, expansion, contraction, all the way through the sun salutation, right? Becomes this whole like jellyfish progression through these movements. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Take 5 breaths here, and at the end of the exhale, I use that to engage my core. And unless I've got some really advanced students, I'm going to move forward on that exhale so that I keep the core engaged. And then inhale. Watch, I'm closing in. Exhale. Inhale, rise up. Exhale, hands down. So again, am I getting bigger? Am I expanding? Or am I contracting and drawing to the midline? And that'll help tell you where it's useful to be inhaling or exhaling in the practice. When you're stepping forward, this is another great example. Inhale, the leg lifts. See, I'm getting bigger. As I exhale, watch how I'm pulling my core in, right? And rounding and getting tiny. That's perfect for the exhale. Inhale, lengthen. Exhale, draw in, step forward. Inhale, big movement, big opening, rise up, right? It's perfect for the inhale. So usually in a standing pose, we might have several breaths here. I'm going to inhale. I'm going to use the exhale to bring myself down because I'm contracting in and engaging the core. So inhale, I'm nice and big. Exhale. Maybe you're flowing, moving through your vinyasa. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea about when we're cueing, why we might choose to be cueing with the inhale, creating space, or the exhale, creating stability, right? So the inhale lends itself to getting bigger. In short, the exhale lends itself to finding core support or connection. Okay, just a final couple thoughts for teaching. If you're really teaching a breath-centered class, where you're going to be cueing the inhales and the exhales a lot, a couple pieces of advice. 1, if you're focusing on the breath, it's going to be harder to cue alignment and to cue all that other stuff. That's just the way it goes, folks, right? So if you're teaching and cueing a lot with the breath, there's going to be a little bit less time for alignment cues, and you're probably going to be moving faster. So focus on the breath, and then what I encourage you to use are cues like stabilizing cues, and I have a video on that you can check out, which is how do you cue transitions safely, and focus on your foundation. So get the foundation super stable, use stabilizing cues to keep people aware during the movement, and then also just know that there's less time to cue to those kind of like persnickety actions and alignment if you're cueing a lot to the breath. But that's okay. It's like sometimes when you're teaching, it's really beautiful to have instead the focus of the class be that jellyfish movement of the breath. And the breath can really help to support alignment when you're moving. The other thing that I would recommend is that you don't have to cue every single breath. So in the Ashtanga lineage, as we talked about, they cue every single breath, and you hold everything like 5 breaths, and that's the way it goes. But if you're teaching an all levels vinyasa class for your students, I might prioritize where I cue the breath. So certainly in sun salutations, I'm going to be really directive about those inhales and exhales. And maybe in transitions like press your feet down, exhale, inhale, rise up and open. Or like we talked about earlier, inhale to lengthen, exhale to twist, engage your core. So I'm going to prioritize certain places where the breath cues really help to focus and enhance the alignment. But I don't need to cue it every single time. If I got my folks up there in Warrior 2 and I know we're gonna hang out there for a few breaths, I might stop the breath cueing, so explicitly, and instead focus on using that time for a little bit more alignment cueing. So it is a fine balance, but cueing with the breath really does create a beautiful internal experience. So it's if you're a flow teacher for sure, a vinyasa teacher, it's worthwhile to explore how you can do that for your students. All right, everyone, there were some tips for cueing with the breath. First of all, we looked at like the anatomy of the breath. What's happening exactly? What's going on there? And then we looked at how you could use that to support the alignment and transitions of certain poses, using the inhale to create space, the exhale for poses or transitions where you want to draw in and contract and engage the pelvic floor and the core. And finally, just some teaching tips for teaching flow in general, which is, hey, you're not going to be able to teach as much alignment, but use your stabilizing cues, and you don't have to cue every single breath, so you can sneak your action cues in there. Anyways, I hope that was helpful for you all. If you enjoyed it, subscribe for more tips. If you have thoughts or questions, put it in the comments below, and I will see you on the mat.